Warning, the following audio transmission is based on theory and is intended for entertainment purposes only. It's Doomsday and its affiliates will not be held liable for anything your dumbass does. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome everybody to It's Doomsday Podcast. Today is December 22nd, 2024. Time is 8:52 p.m. and joining me is the ever so squishy Safe Prep. What's up, buddy?
Not much, man. What are you into?
The in-laws come tomorrow, so that's always fun. Trying to get projects done around here and avoid going into my job at all cost. That's how I'm living, dude. How are you living?
Well, that's better than passing Flu A around your house like we did this week.
Ooh, Flu A. You mean you don't go get the flu shot in your line of work?
It's required or we have to wear a mask. So, yeah, I get it. But they're pretty much making a guess when they make those vaccines. So the youngest called it first, then the second one got it, and then I got it. And Mrs. Safe Prep may be getting it, so we'll see.
Ooh, that sucks, man. Yeah, I'd start taking something soon for that, man. Be upping my garlic intake and whatnot.
I'm on the other end of it, so I'm better.
Gotcha. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's show is going to be on the firsthand account experience, my experiences of Helene, Hurricane Helene. And I'm sure everybody out there has been kind of waiting to hear from me, knowing that I live in an affected area, knowing that I am a preparedness person. I do the podcast and other things, and so I'm kind of betting there's people out there who do want to hear this, right?
Absolutely.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a two-part episode. I wanted to kind of cover this in two separate lights: the course of events that transpired through myself, eyes of a first responder, and then how my preps helped me after the fact, like how we use the preps to our advantage, and kept things good with all the destruction and damage that happened. So, I guess we'll just dive right into this. Okay. So our emergency services director in our county did a fantastic job with organization and coordination of every emergency personnel throughout the county we live in, right? They put out massive amount of warning for us to get prepared for this, right? This was not last minuted, if that makes sense. We had plenty of notice in our county that this storm was coming and that it had potential life-ending results. In fact, when the emergency service director was giving his briefings, he says this has all the potential to be a life-ending event. So we all need to be taking this extremely serious and do everything accordingly. The county worked really hard at evacuating areas that are known for flooding, but people are stupid, and some people just refuse to leave, right? The county went as far as to plaster up posters around town about the storm, posted evacuation notices. I mean, they went ham. Thousands of these things went out, right? So in my world, at my station, with what I do, we kind of just all gathered at the station, pretty much all of our personnel, everybody we could get our hands on, and brought them in and briefed people and did a lot of last-minute buying. There was a lot of last-minute shopping that took place. One of the big things was food. We bought a lot of food for our responders, okay? We kind of wanted to have it be to the point where you didn't have to worry about were you going to eat? We had food ready. Things like soups and sandwich making materials and like snacks and, Little Debbie cakes and things that if you just needed to throw some calories in your mouth to regain some energy, you could do that and then run back out the door, right? So we went ahead, we did a lot of shopping, got everything done. The moment of the night of, we did some more last minute shopping for things like extra flashlights, headlamps, batteries, just what you would think you would need to respond at night. And I find it funny. At the time, it was almost like I had to beg to get approval to go buy batteries and flashlights. Like those were things that, like nobody's going to get in trouble. Nothing bad's going to happen to them at night, right? We should be okay. So I just thought it was really odd that was like kind of like, poking the bear, like, hey, can I run down to Harbor Freight and buy some flashlights? Can I get the card to go do that kind of thing? So went ahead, did that, made sure all of our water equipment, life vest, stuff like that, everything was in working order, all the water equipment, and made sure that all our staff had a place to sleep, this, that, the other, because it was a mandatory call-in for our department. Okay, so we had cots and air mattresses and everything set up everywhere with everybody staying at the station. It was like camp, right? Like all of us guys are there together. It's like a big camp out. It's fantastic. I had a blast. We were all taking bets on when the storm would initially hit. The night of going into the early morning hours, it was just rain. Like nothing had transpired yet. Now, I probably racked out about midnight before the storm hit. About 6 a.m. to 6:30, somewhere in that neighborhood, my boss grabs me and says, hey, get in the truck, we're going. And I said, okay. Now, mind you, we stayed up all night with briefings and doing team building, who was going to be where, whatnot. That got blown out of the water first thing in the morning. The chaos ensued at 6:30 in the morning. So we go to meet with a Swiftwater rescue crew that was in town. The mutual aid we had before the storm even hit was fantastic. Our emergency services director really knows his shit, man, and made sure we had resources from all over the place before this storm even got here. So we go to meet with the Swiftwater team, and we're there just talking to these guys. The first call came out around 7 to 7:30 in the morning. The first 911 call came out. We try to go to this call, and this is as the storm is hitting. The rain is coming down. The wind is heavy. There's trees falling in the roadway. At one point, we are in the roadway with the fire department in the pouring rain trying to cut trees out of the road. Access immediately got cut off to everywhere. Power was cut off. Phones were down. Everything, like all at once, immediately. So we are now in a position, and it took us about 30 minutes to realize this. We have no power throughout our county. We have no phone lines throughout our county, like no hard lines, okay? And then all of a sudden, all at once, all of our cell phones went down, okay? So cell phones went down, and the only carrier that was still up and running was T-Mobile. Once we realized all the cell towers were down, we lost our comm center as well. Our 911 communication center flooded, and comms had to be relocated. And when comms went down, we had almost 100 active 911 calls when comms went down. So nobody knows. I don't know if anybody truly knows. Maybe some like people higher up do, how many 911 calls came in that were missed because our comm center went down, and how many we have no idea the amount of people that tried to call 911 that couldn't because there was no cell signal because all the cell phones went down. Okay. So you with me so far, Safe Prep? This is about
and my list of notes. I made a few notes. Obviously, I'm listening to the story for the most part with some key things. It's been a minute since this happened. It's been a couple of months, and so just to remind people, y'all had, it wasn't just Helene showing up. Y'all had a tremendous amount of precipitation prior to it even getting there. Correct?
Yes. So we had a lot of rain in the weeks leading up to this. So the ground was pretty saturated to start with, right? And I couldn't tell you, I couldn't even begin to tell you if it was like abnormal rain, like we had more than normal or we didn't have more than normal, like I really don't know. I would say it's probably the average amount of rainfall we get, but so the ground was saturated before the storm got here. So,
another thing, since Jeff just telling us from a point of a first responder, what we do as first responders on a daily basis is respond to emergencies. Active big events, disasters, that's a whole nother ball game, and we practice that and we plan for that, but it is very difficult because we're responding to regular emergencies day after day. And folks have to remember that we rely on the same infrastructure that everybody else does: the telephone lines, the cell phone service, the roads, clear roads, those types of things. So all of those things affect our ability to be able to be mobile and get to the people or even hear from the people that need our help. So
I something else that had happened with this. So once our comm center went down, okay, we were relying on Viper radio only. Okay, there was a thought that we might switch back to like UHF or VHF or whatever, but we were running on Viper radio. So what had happened, and I guess nobody had the forethought to think about this, and now I see a very huge flaw in the system. So cell phone towers kind of act as repeaters for the Viper radios, right? So the Viper can ping off cell phone towers and do different things, is my understanding of it. So whenever we had all these cell phone towers go down, it limited the capabilities of the Viper radio. So what we found for a few days after the storm with these down cell phone towers was, and with all the different people we had operating on all of these systems, you would get a busy signal over the radio. You could not key up. And then even if you were keying up, your transmission might not get through. So there was a lot of the time we were running, we had comms, but they just were not working as they should have been. Okay.
Yeah.
So at this point, this is the first day. This is what's happening, okay? And right now, in the moment of the first day, the storm finally passed by the afternoon, and going out into the world and just seeing the utter destruction that happened. My wife and kids ended up coming to the station because there was a tree blocking our road. We could not get, not the road, not our driveway, but the main road to turn in miles away from our house. You couldn't get to even in the direction of home, right? So long and the short of it is the tree was so big and it was over lines like nobody was messing with it. So for days, maybe even a week, that tree stayed there till people found a way to divert around it. So being that my wife couldn't come home, she decided to come down to the station. But it's good because we had power, we had water, we have backup generators at the station, so the kids could have a sense of normalcy. So getting out there after the chaos and the destruction when the storm passed and the sun shining again, the amount of down lines, down trees on houses. I mean, when 911 center came back up, it was repeat calls of landslide, entrapment, landslide, entrapment, landslide, entrapment, right? Just it was like it was on repeat coming out over the radio. And as this was taking place, we're trying to respond to these calls. In certain roads, you cannot get down because there's still trees in the roadway, right? And if you're on an apparatus that's not equipped to deal with down trees, there's nothing you can do. You're not going to walk. You can't get out and leave your apparatus and hike 10 miles in to go provide aid, knowing that there's so much other help that needs to be rendered, right? So it was a very hard point to be like, okay, we can't go this way. We got to try to figure out a way to get around. And it's like, if it takes us an hour to get there, are we even going to be doing any good at that point, or should we respond to something else? So just utter chaos was taking place during this first day, and watching people come out of the woodwork on that first day to start reopening roads. You had private citizens in the roadway with chainsaws reopening areas, right, to gain access again. So once the first day passed and the second day came along, it was like the first day on repeat, out responding to shit. Cell phones are still down. Everything's still down. No power, no internet. Everybody's just trying to get through. I eventually got requested to go to a certain area and got tasked and was given a few mission-specific things to do. and not by any means anything hard or crazy. But when I got out to this area where I was tasked to be, that's when I saw how bad the destruction actually was. I got to see the firsthand damage, houses missing, shipping containers like stuck in the river against trees that had floated away, seeing the remnants of where a house used to be, okay? Seeing a shed that somebody was living in with a mattress and a bed and a dresser, you know, that came down in one of the landslides and just split open for the world to see that someone was living in this shed in the middle of nowhere, right? You know, mud levels, you know, areas that were once roadways that I traversed that are now walk-in only areas because there's no way to get an ATV, a side-by-side, anything in, right? So I'm getting to see this destruction firsthand, and I'm assisting with extractions, okay, trying to evacuate these people and get them out of there. And this was before the big things started taking place. This is when the world was starting to know what happened in North Carolina. This is before it really got out there. Okay, this is the first 2 days. So the second and the third day, as I'm tasked to this area, the third day I really start to see this pick up and operations start happening. You know, and I'm requested to be in this area, so that's where I'm at during the duration of the first week of this event. I helped assist getting 100 people off Black Hawk helicopters and documented them, people that were evacuated from areas that were inaccessible, okay? We had the guard flying in, MREs, water. I spent like 2 days solid just running back and forth to helicopters, taking off either supplies or people, right? And still had yet to go home and see what my house was like, to see what the destruction was like at my home, okay? So this went on, the crazy chaos of everything, and just basically running on, I don't even know, just running on pure adrenaline. It was the weirdest thing. Safe prep, I gained 10 pounds during the hurricane because I would eat every chance I got.
Yeah.
So I was packing on calories and just going nonstop throughout this storm. So we went ahead, kept pushing out that one operation with evacuations and stuff. Once evacuations were done, we started doing door-to-doors. And when we started doing door-to-doors and going in deeper areas, you saw more destruction. You saw how bad it was, how many more landslides there were. Places where we had to get out and walk because we couldn't get through places. At one point, it was me, 2 sheriff's deputies, and some dude from the FBI walking through the woods, going door to door, checking on houses, right? And when ladies and gentlemen, when I say this was an apocalyptic style event, like this felt like the apocalypse, I mean, we're dead in the water. There's no cell phones. There's no nothing. There's no power. At one point, me and a deputy are going through the basement of a fire department, searching for things we could use to mark houses safe. Like in the basement, rummaging through shit to find things that we could mark houses with to let people know, hey, this has been cleared, okay? Going in, shaking doorknobs and going into houses and making sure there's no people in there. Like just full on crazy. And I heard someone say during this event, when you work in emergency services, Safe Prep, you know this, they don't like cowboy shit. They like things to be done by the book, okay? Our superiors basically said, fuck that, it's time for cowboy shit. Let's do cowboy shit. And so that's what we did. Okay. Moving forward into the scenario, at one point in time, and I don't remember what day it was, but it was like private citizens started showing up in the masses, bringing trailers. Like some guy would take his race car trailer, like his enclosed 24-foot trailer, took out his race car and showed up with supplies to the ceiling. Everything from dog food to clothes, cleaning supplies, toilet paper. I mean, you name it, it was on these trailers, right? We had a guy show up with drones. I can't remember what the payload was on these drones, but the guy uses the drones to spray crops with insecticides and stuff like that. He just flies around farmers' fields and sprays chemicals all day with his drones. Shows up with a gooseneck trailer. The gooseneck trailer's full of gas and bottled water. And he shows up with his amazing, crazy, awesome, could pick you up off the ground drones to help drone in supplies to inaccessible areas. Okay. At one point, we have a private citizen land at our base of operations with his own helicopter and drop us off a fucking Starlink so we could have communications up and running.
So two things I want you to talk about briefly. Parts of your story are in stark contrast to a lot of the social media stuff we saw coming out immediately after it was over. I mean, everybody was talking about it, even people that had no idea what was happening. But specifically on day 2 and days after, the North Carolina National Guard had helicopters and they were moving stuff everywhere. And then you also mentioned that private citizens were showing up, and there was obviously enough cooperation between those guys and your local officials where they were able to help. And those are stories that really didn't get out.
So, okay, I guess I should start with this. There's been a lot of rumors online that FEMA was shutting down operations and they were preventing air traffic, and there was all these things happening. Okay, the long and the short of that is everything's a little bit half true. The area that I'm in, they didn't prevent any private aircraft from coming in. Okay, like that was not a thing. But in all honesty, with the amount of air traffic that was happening between the military's helicopters and different government agencies and private citizens, air traffic did need to be limited because it was getting dangerous. You had way too many aircraft, way too many aircraft in way too condensed of an area. It was bad. So if you hear anybody out there say, well, they limit supplies from coming in, well, it's like they probably were limiting flights because there was too many people in the air. You got to think about we've got Black Ops and H-47s and, private aircraft and drones everywhere, not to mention the regular aircraft that fly during these emergencies, right?
And they're not even flying in safe conditions because there's obviously hazards everywhere. Power lines down, loose debris, those kind of things. So it's dangerous already.
Right, exactly. And then you got to think like your helicopters, like your flight medics, they're running nonstop. So they're in the air as well. So there's way too much aircraft up there to begin with. And I'll tell you what, we have become, we are now in an era where if there is a disaster, if there is an emergency, there's going to be so much aircraft overhead because we have it at our disposal and it works for disasters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was like being in a war zone with the amount of military aircraft that were overhead for like a month, right? Yeah. So, I mean, again, total apocalyptic scenario. Like this felt like what we prepare for all of the time. So the other thing I want to kind of put to bed because it did happen. It is true, but people are misinterpreting what happened. And the big story is FEMA agents were preventing people to, driving in their cars from taking supplies different places. Now, let me start with this. The general public is stupid. We were so short-staffed on responders that we're taking probation officers and having them direct traffic and close roadways. We're taking COs from the prisons, putting them in a prison vehicle and shutting down roadways.
Yeah.
And it's not because we don't want supplies to get in. It's because there's no road there anymore. There's a landslide up there. You can't get anywhere. And there's people bringing in trailers on their trucks, and there's no way to turn around on these roads. So they're just trying to prevent a disaster from happening because at this point, Google has not updated everything yet saying, hey, there used to be a road there. Now there's a landslide. You can't go that way. And then the fact of the matter is, we had over 1,000 documented landslides, and they're not all being reported. So Google might tell you to go down this certain road, like your GPS might tell you to go this way, and then there's no more road. We did have it happen maybe a week after the fact. We had a guy in a U-Haul truck get stuck in the middle of nowhere with his truck falling down a damn landslide because Google told him to go that way, and he was just trying to bring in supplies, right? So, I mean, if you had people out there, it may not have been FEMA. It could have been somebody from a prison. It could have been a probation officer. Could have been anybody because just resources were thin. But yes, they absolutely were telling people not to go down different roads, and they had different roads closed, and they weren't allowing people to bring in supplies simply because it was to protect the public. It wasn't because they were trying to stop supplies from coming in. And that's what the big rumor's been. And that's just not it. So after about 3 or 4 days into the storm, mutual aid started pouring in with the help of FEMA from all over the place. I met paramedics from Texas. We housed 2 other fire departments. Like at our station, we housed 2 auxiliary fire departments, like one for 1 week, one for the other week. They were from like 2 separate departments, came in and we housed them so they could help us respond to stuff. And then pretty much every fire department in the area got extra firefighters from somewhere else, right? They came up in their own truck, so they had a secondary truck, secondary crews to go out and respond because there were so many calls. Same thing went with all of our paramedic units. It was the same thing. There's paramedics coming in from Texas, all over the place. I met some really cool people. And then,
but you've also, folks have also got to realize that when a department is isolated and they're responding to calls for days, it's first responders have to sleep for them to be safe. And so they're kind of out there 24/7 for days at a time until the mutual aid starts to show up. And it's so awesome that states have the interoperability agreements, and that FEMA coordinates that, and the federal government actually pays for it. A lot of these places, when they send folks, the department that they come from pays for it, but that's all reimbursed through the federal government through FEMA.
Right, and I'm doing the freaking the IS-214s now, or the 214 documents. Like, we're doing all those now for FEMA to get reimbursed for all the extra crazy stuff that we had to do.
Yeah.
And so when some of these paramedic units showed up, they had FEMA tags on them because they were permitted to be there by FEMA. So I'm meeting paramedics that are in town from Texas because they were told to come up here, and they're rolling around with a paper FEMA tag on the back of the ambulance, right? And then at this point as well, you're having the Red Cross show up in full force, right? Is also happening. And I don't think anybody really understands too, and this didn't click until a few days in. Nobody had flood insurance. Nobody had landslide insurance. Nobody had the insurance that would cover the loss of everything that they had. There's people that lost everything, and there's no recovery for them. There's no check coming from the insurance company. There's nothing, right? And this has been a hard pill to swallow for a lot of citizens, especially in the county where I'm in, because they have lost everything.
Yep.
Right. And and we weren't thinking about this just because with everything we got going on, my wife is running the restaurant still off of a generator because there's no power, and feeding all the first responders in the area for free.
Yep.
Okay. And this goes on for 2 weeks. We're just feeding all the first responders for free. And running, the restaurant with no lights, no power, just we've got gas so we can cook, and we're using a generator to keep the cold storage cold. Right.
Yeah.
And so the whole community kind of rallied together in a sense and started really kicking ass and putting the storm in its place and saying, okay, we can handle this. We can all work together and we could get this done. And just little things made so much of a difference. I mean, at one point, me and my partner we have a generator on a Stokes basket, and we're carrying it through a ravine to deliver it to a couple's house so they could have electricity.
Yep.
Right. So like all these little things. At one point, I'm hiking over landslides to retrieve cats from someone's house, and I'm carrying out cat carriers over landslides. Right. So at one point we had a rescue incident where we had to rescue a horse that was drowning.
Jesus.
So I mean, yeah. So it was big stuff and it was little stuff, man. Like it was the little insignificant, like, let me take a ride up here and bring this one guy who's not leaving some MREs and a couple cases of water, to the next minute, you're doing this big crazy thing and then, going to get some dude's cats, so it's all over the place. Or, like I said, I'm getting people off the helicopters and I'm just documenting, who are you with? Do you have a contact number? Blah, blah, blah. What's your first name? What's your last name? And just documenting.
Did y'all have any legitimate security concerns or concerns for your own safety as far as criminal activity or threats or looting or anything like that?
Yeah, so certain towns had to institute curfews. You weren't supposed to be outside walking the streets after 9 p.m. And I think that eventually just basically got moved to, I think, just like dark, like it was dark, you couldn't be outside kind of thing. So we had that happen. As far as security concerns with ourselves, I'll tell you what, all of us were armed. Every single person was armed. Citizens were armed. Responders were armed. Everybody was carrying.
North Carolina, baby.
Yeah, every single person was. So, I mean, with the amount of guns that you had floating around, if anybody wanted to fuck around, some shit would go sideways. Yeah, it'd go sideways real quick. But something that I did notice was people quickly seemed like they were getting off their meds and becoming mentally unstable without the conveniences of electricity and TV and internet and phones. Like, people started losing their minds. So the amount of calls we got that were, mental related, it seemed like those were on the rise initially, right? And it's crazy. I mean, without going too much into detail, like I would run into somebody, they'd be fine. An hour later, they're not fine, and there's a call about that person. So those are the kind of things that were transpiring. Okay, and after about, the fourth day in, let me start with this. Private citizens showed up with their own, like, excavators, bobcats, chainsaws, side-by-sides before the DOT even was on site. I don't know where the fuck the DOT was, okay? But I saw private citizens before I saw the DOT. That's all I'll have to say about that. So, also at this point in time, you're having floods of outside contractors and businesses coming into the area. Okay, to repair roads, landslides, cut up trees off power lines, and power workers and all these people that are coming in from everywhere to come in and help start to rebuild after about the fourth, fifth day in. Now, here's what people weren't thinking about: is we saw our supply web dwindle down to nothing very, very quickly because we even lost like fire departments and stuff during the storm. Okay, so when we talk about like, oh yeah, a restaurant got flooded out, a grocery store got flooded out, we've lost where first responders were coming out of. I know a guy that worked at one department, destroyed. So when you had this big influx of people come in, so you've got all these grocery stores that have been destroyed, they're shut down, cold storage is gone, everything else. They only have the ones that didn't flood out, just had dry goods and other random things, right? So you had this big influx of people come in, and it dwindled the grocery stores down so freaking quick. It was amazing. Like, you
probably weren't paying attention to it, but locally and even outside of your area, I'm sure hotels were booked up.
Oh yeah. So what was pretty crazy was I was at the grocery store the day before it hit. I didn't get back to the grocery store until 2 weeks later, and the shelves were barren.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2 weeks, just depleted. Now, imagine this is a scenario that, this is not the nuke. This is not the famine. This is a storm, an isolated incident in a singular area. And your supply chain is just destroyed that quick.
Destroyed.
In 2 weeks, it's gone, right? At this point in time, discovering that the supply chain was gone at that point and the grocery store started dwindling down is when I finally got to start returning and going back home again, kind of thing. Like, I was able to spend some time at home, and I was given the grace for some like R&R. It was basically, hey, take a few days off on the house, you'll get paid for it. Everybody needs to recover.
Yep.
You guys have been going nonstop. Everybody needs to recover. So for everybody out there that's listened to this episode, I want to thank you for hanging in there, because I know it's just a lot of like kind of droning on, but there's a lot that took place in a very short amount of time. And there's no way for me to do an episode going back and accounting things in detail, because number one, HIPAA, number two, it would be an episode 2 weeks long. So, but these were the key high points of, what rocked and rolled my daily existence here. Yeah.
You're a fairly new first responder compared to some of us old guys, right?
Right.
Tell people what a privilege it is to be able to one that gets called to go help people like that in a situation like that, and have the training and the know-how and the ability to be able to help when your neighbor needs help. I know a sick part of you, because we're all a little sick, enjoyed being the one that got to help.
Okay, so I was told I'm not supposed to say this, but I'm sick of not saying it. I had an absolute blast.
I know you did.
Getting everything I got to do during the storm.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm running an ATV down a highway to go run supplies into people as I'm armed, right, as the cops are waving me in. I mean, this is like, they used to chase me on these things as kids driving down the road, right? And now here we are, we're getting waved on to go help out in a disaster. Dude, it was a blast, man.
First responders, we don't ever wish harm or disaster on anybody, but if it happens, we want to be at work. We want to have the opportunity to use the skills that honestly don't get used every day to help people that are in the most need. And that's what you got to do. And you got to do it early in your career, which is pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Like, dude, when I was like, full-time security contractor and stuff, when these storms hit, they just basically sent us home during the storm. Then afterward, that's when we were pulled in. Yeah. So this is like totally different scenario. But guys, that's all I got. We are going to do a part 2 on this episode talking about how my preps helped me in this disaster and how my prepper knowledge helped me in this disaster. And why I think it's more important than ever that we all prep and we all get on this page, because you would have never expected this storm to hit here, Safe prep. You got anything else before we're out of here, buddy?
No, I think this is our last episode before Christmas. So
it is. It's our last episode before Christmas. So everybody have a
good one.
Yeah, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and all that good stuff. Safe prep. Where can they find you out on social media?
TikTok at Safe Prep, YouTube at Safe Prep.
All right, and don't forget the email. It's doomsdaypodcast@gmail.com. Hit up my website, jestersvoice.com. All right, buddy, we're out of here.
Later.
This is an emergency action message. At approximately 1 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, NORAD is tracking 15 ICBM nuclear missiles inbound to the following cities: Orlando, Miami, Pittsburgh, Dover, Newark, Richland, Philadelphia, New York City, Baltimore, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Boston, Seattle, Detroit. This is an extremely deadly situation. Stay tuned. The next emergency message will be a presidential address.